Quantum entanglement means when two or more particles share the same energy. In non-human terms, they share the same harmonic of a frequency. In other words, they are the same, even if they are two. So what happens to one will mirror in the other particle, no matter where or when it is. That is, if you have an atom with two electrons in two exact specific orbits, another one will be the same. But as you modify or remove one of its electrons from that atom, the other will also lose it, even though it is 10,000 light years away. This is because it is moving with a harmonic flow or gravity flow that creates both from the side of the ether, where there are no distances, because the principle of non-locality of all things applies. The two electrons is only an example, because they do not have a specific orbit as such, uncertainty principle, but yes, a dynamics of harmonics of an exact frequency. And that creates them in the same way. They are mirrors, and with that, many phenomena are also explained. Like having mirrors of physical bodies and having two bodies with a single consciousness. This is used in advanced quantum computing systems. The basic problem here is that if you have a base 10 system, you are missing two numbers, 10 and 11. Because in base 10 mathematics, you really have the digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 0. And you do 10 with a 1 and a 0. In base 12 math, you only hit two digital factors when you get to 12, while the number 10 and the number 11 are still single digits. So you have the digits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, another for 10, and another for 11. This, in basic mathematics, does not influence anything. But in advanced formulas or energy flow dynamics, the difference is tremendous. Where you are, you just don't have this system. I don't have any symbols that I can use for 10, just the Roman X maybe. But not for 11, since in Roman it would be XI, or two digits again. So I have to give you Taygetan math from scratch, starting with symbols. But in your math, are these numbers on the ether side, like 3, 6, 9, or material side? In flow or dynamics of energy flow, yes, they are on the side of the ether. But for Tesla, for example, we have the numbers 3, 6, 9. But for us, we use the numbers 3, 6, 9, 12 as a base. What happens here exactly? Do you know a capacitor, how it works, or a coil? A coil, like a car. Supposedly you pass 12 volts through the inside of it, and for a short time it will provide about 10,000 volts that will be passed to the spark plugs to cause the fuel to ignite. Where do those 10,000 volts come from if they only had 12? From the ether, with a depolarization, like what happens as an induction phenomenon between high voltage electrical cables, where you pass a cable next to another that is not connected to the first, but the energy passes through the air to the second. So, if you have an energetic dynamics without interference between an apparatus with specific harmonics based on the numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, you will create a perfect depolarization on the other side, with its corresponding mirror of and with an energetic dynamics of 3, 6, 9, 12. A depolarization is a spark. The point of depolarization is the 0 point, from where the 0 point energy obtains its name. But as Anekita already told you, what you are given on Earth is incomplete. By knowing the energy dynamics of one side, the material one, you will know its equivalent on the ether side. So the holographic quantum computer exploits this knowledge to find solutions. It has the map of how the result should be, and using quantum entanglement, it searches on the ether side for any energy dynamics, harmonics of a frequency, that fit and are equivalent to the result it seeks. That is, the particles of the particle accelerators of the brain seek their mirrors on the other side. Comments Robert. Wow, thank you. I have a question. Earlier you said, that is, if you have an atom with 2 electrons in 2 exact specific orbits, another will be the same. But as you modify or remove one of its electrons from that atom, the other will also lose it, even though it is 10,000 light years away. Yes, asks Robert. If a quantum computer functions like a human brain, can manipulating a human alter his other selves in other timelines? Yes, and that happens all the time. Your brain is a quantum computer. Your other selves influence you as you influence them all the time, and the total of them is what defines your personality, asks Robert. But is the mind control exercised in this timeline scalar? As in media mind control over a person, yes, it would by definition have to be scalar. Understanding scalar as transcending other timelines, asks Robert. Only timelines, not densities, right? Also densities. The problem here with or regarding mind control is that the densities, as we have already said, depend on the consciousness and the perception or level of perception. So the change in density between the versions of a person does influence, or in many cases defeats, mind control. So if the Earth is totally oppressed in other timelines and its inhabitants, how does this affect the inhabitants of this timeline, and vice versa? If you free people from this timeline, does it have an impact on others? What happens in one echoes in the others. Yes, it has an influence, but not totally. I've read this in the book, but there was something stronger there. Now I don't remember exactly. That in some timelines they have ourselves in some kind of prison or something, sucking vital energy from their selves from other timelines, doing experiments like this. I no longer remember what it was about. That is from the Matrix, or it sounds like the Matrix. Although in theory, if what you do here influences your other timelines, then everything is related. Something here could influence what your other selves are doing. Here, you can also see how the help of the quantum eye is sought, according to what they say out there. Yes, the other selves always influence. It also explains déjà vu. Comments Robert. But also what ourselves do in more positive timelines and in higher densities also influences us. Yes, in the same way. Something that touched me, what Aneka was talking about, was when she said that to find an answer to something, like the watch example, it is not really looking for it, it is going to get it. This happened to me when I was looking for the name of my musical project. I lied down and thought, I'm not going to make it up. I will take it from my other self. My band already exists. Pass it on to me, the name. And in a second, without thinking, words appeared. Dagger Sol. And I knew it was my name, without thinking. It was magical. It happened to me only once, with such force and certainty. Our brain as a quantum computer, or rather, our mind. Yes, that is exactly the way it works. And that's where the artistic inspiration comes from, and all that. That is why the Dark Ones cannot create anything, only modify what already exists at their convenience due to their little connection to the quantum field, the source. Yes, makes you think, to whom did it occur first? As you always say. Nobody. It's just there, like everything else. We only take it from other selves. We just take it. But why? Because in the end, we are all the same. Creations of the same potential energy soup. We are the same, and we are the source, the all. Yes, but this does not confer that at some point that something had to not exist to later be created. Or does it exist and not exist at the same time? Whether it exists or not is only relative to something else. From the position of the ether or the source, everything already exists. Comments Robert. There was no before or after. I think two things at the same time. It does not exist and exists at the same time. Also in the non-manifested. There is no concept of point of creation or point of destruction, because it is outside of all space and time, being that space is just an illusion and time too. Therefore, the concept of infinity applies here. The entire unified universe was never created and will never be destroyed, because it is outside of time, therefore eternal. But yes, you can also say it like that, Gosha. It exists and does not, like a qubit. If everything is everything, it has to include non-existence to have a point of reference, as you have said. Sure, asks Robert. But it is easy to say that something that exists does not exist. But how do you say that there exists something that does not? But doesn't really? How do you determine that? Well, okay, your sun does not exist, okay, comments Robert. That's why. There is always something until what is not there is something. But the unified field or ether cannot be defined, because as it includes everything you say it is not it, because it would only be a tiny part of what it is, including your definition. But in that case, saying that the ether is the result of a muffin with jam, that is also correct. Everything is there, comments Robert. Sure, there is no non-existence. Of course there is, comments Robert, because it's already something. Well, if you look at it that way, okay. Immediately when I take it in terms of looking at it, well, okay, non-existence becomes something, comments Robert. Sure. Interposing that it must also include what isn't there is valid, but it gives an idea of something less to the whole, since you are throwing in a contrast to the point of all inclusion. In other words, you have just introduced duality. So you must include the concept that it is not ether. Ether and not ether. But the non-ether would only exist in relation to a relative parameter and not to the all that includes it. Non-ether is only part of a minor concept within the ether itself, and valid only from a point relative to something else, comments Robert. That is why the ether has always been there, because it includes everything. Yes, and it is impossible to define. Yes, okay. And looking from the more practical perspective now, if you say that there are all possibilities, and there are no possibilities that do not exist, so there are also all kinds of tortures that someone has experienced, everything you can imagine, and also all kinds of luxuries you can imagine, and with all the variations in between? Yes. Absolutely everything? Necessarily yes. Whatever occurs to you on one level or another exists. Yes, comments Robert. Even us being on the ship and Swaruu being from Earth, the reverse. For example, the laws of matter, or the so-called universal laws, only apply to something relative to something else. That is, they are only valid at this point density, or as you define it, but not at another. Yes. For example, Dolores Cannon was already getting into this, because according to what she was researching, she had found evidence of star systems with square planets. Square planets! If you focus enough on what you think, you give it enough energy, that will be whatever you are thinking. You bring it in from the other side with your quantum scalar computer, your brain. So be careful about what you think. But then, all this becomes a huge circus. Are there planets where the races are blue clowns? Another planet in the shape of a croissant? Where is the limit to what absurdities might exist? Comments Robert. Or the flat Earth with a giant turtle holding the Earth. Yes, and I mean it. And I have been saying it for a long time. I am literally telling you that the only thing that limits you is the idea that you are limited. To think that there is no place where the inhabitants are made of bread and live in a sea of coffee with milk, and that this is in the four suns that revolve around a planet in the shape of a turnip head, is limitation.